podcasting from my closet in northern Japan. This is Reimagining Hustle, a podcast for entrepreneurial parents creating a life where business and parenthood live peacefully in the same space. I'm your host, Roxanne Merkett, a mom of two, microbusiness coach, and serial entrepreneur on a journey to prove that it is possible to do what you love without sacrificing all your precious time. Let's do this. Welcome back to Reimagining Hustle. I am very delighted to introduce my guest today. I have Candice Bakx-Friesen with me. Candice, how are you?
Hey, everything's great.
Good. So I will be the first to admit, because I think it's important to know when other people mess up. So I have totally blown it, and you've been so gracious. Candice and I actually recorded an episode about a year and a half ago, and it was right in the middle of my move around the world. And Candice, I lost your episode. I was telling you before we started the recording, my worst nightmare came true in that we had this great podcast recorded and I thought I had it all scheduled and edited out. And then I just didn't post it. And so, Candice, thank you for being gracious enough to do another one of these with me. And I mean, you've been so nice about it this whole time. So thank you.
Oh, no problem. Technology's awesome, but only when it works.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, definitely, I would love to blame this on technology, but this is 100% like me just overlooking it. And the only reason I bring it up is because I know that there are a lot of mom entrepreneurs listening to this podcast, and we think that we can have it perfect all the time, and we don't. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to teach that by example, and also thank you for just, again, being so gracious. So let's dive in. I am familiar with you because I got to listen to the podcast with you, but nobody else knows you here. So tell us about you. Will you tell us about you? Tell us about the work that you do, your journey to get there. You do a lot. You do a lot of things. So will you tell us about, all of it?
Yeah. Hustle is like my middle name.
Yeah.
So, so I am an entrepreneur. I live in Canada. I started my journey, I suppose, as a child already because my grandparents and parents, I came from a background of entrepreneurs. So you learn as you get older, right? A lot of lessons that, they're not going to teach you in books. So, anyway, fast forward, I decided I was going to become an accountant and I was going to be like my aunt. And she was the only one in my family that had gone to university because, again, everyone else was entrepreneurs. And, everything was kind of looking great. And then I just decided, and part of that too was I was going to become a career woman, not have kids, just focus and work. And then never say never because I've got 4 kids and a husband and life is good. No, from there, I decided, well, maybe I'm not going to become an accountant. So I did still go to university, but ended up, long story short, through a couple of different paths. I got into real estate. So I've been doing that for about 16 years. And within that, people were asking me after the transaction was done, you seem to know something about money. Like, can I ask you a question about money? And, these kinds of things happen often enough. I think you need to listen to that and recognize that, there might be something there. So then I became a money coach, which is really just helping people with finances. And I'm not selling anything, right? Like, obviously there's a fee to go through coaching, but it's not that I'm selling an investment. I'm not selling life insurance. So there's no bias. There's nobody thinking, okay, are you just telling me this because you want me to buy, $1 million life insurance policy? And I think, 20 years ago, the banker maybe did this role for people. They would say, okay, you want to get a loan? How are you going to pay for it? Let's go through a budget. But now, it's like e-sign paperwork. You don't even see a banker. And, so there's this gap where people just don't know who to talk to, right? And money's a taboo subject. So it doesn't come up at the dinner table with your family, your friends. So it's something that people struggle with. And it's not necessarily like only paycheck to paycheck. You could be doing well in life, but it's like, what should I be investing in? Like, am I investing in the right thing? So anyway, that's been really good and rewarding to work as a money coach as well. And then, we've got some other side businesses and my husband has a business as well.
So you really just have not escaped the entrepreneur world. You're born into it and here you are in it again.
Loving
That's
it.
amazing. That's amazing. So it's so interesting hearing you talk about being a money coach, right? And so I think about my husband and I had an interesting I'm not even gonna be so kind as to say an interesting experience. It was a really bad experience with a financial advisor a couple of years ago, and I experienced exactly what you're talking about, right? He tried to sell us up on all these things, and we knew he was making a profit from him, and he wasn't listening to the things that we needed. And so
Yeah.
I think a money coach would have been such an interesting experience, such a positive um difference, I think. And so what kind of questions are people asking before they hire you? You know, they're having all these internal questions and they're thinking, I really want to talk to somebody. Is a financial advisor the right person? Is a money coach the right person? What kind of questions are getting them to you?
Yeah. A lot of times it's just wanting to have those conversations. So feeling like you're in a crossroads of not really knowing where to talk and who to talk to.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's spouses who don't, or partners who don't talk about money, or they're always fighting about money. So, so there's the referee role in that of trying to
Mhm.
help people sort of see the other side of things. So it can be entrepreneurs I'm working with and small business owners, helping them obviously decrease expenses, increase income, um, setting sales goals, all of those sorts of things.
Mhm.
It could be an individual. I've run teens in money, so talking to teens. So those are kind of a few of the different areas that I cover.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And you talk about money being really taboo. How do you talk to your kids about money so that it's not taboo for them?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things that I realized was, well, two things. Number one, when kids say, "How much did this house cost?"
Yeah.
No, you got to answer. You can't say none of your business because that's a lot of where the problems come from, right? Is saying, we can't talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. And especially if if you're listening and you're in the struggle, it's really hard to feel confident to talk to your kids about money because you don't want them to know, right? That
Mhm.
it's going really bad or that it's like it's very tight. And I think the other thing that we have to kind of recognize is what we say about money, especially around when we don't want to spend money.
Mhm.
So oftentimes what people will say, and this can even be within, again, a partnership, if one person manages the money, they might say to the other person, no, we don't have money for that. But, maybe half an hour later, they're going and buying something, right? And it's like, wait a minute, I thought we had no money because you said we had,
Mm.
but, changing that to say, we're choosing not to spend money on that right now because we have to pay for this or pay for
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
So kids know, right? Like kids recognize that there's things that you have to spend money on. So it's not really a secret, but again, anytime you're struggling, the first thing you do in any area of life is you kind of shut down, right? So
Mhm.
if you have trouble in your relationship, suddenly you start to kind of shrink back, or trouble with money, or maybe you lost your job, shrink back. Don't want to talk to anybody. I got to deal with this.
Mhm.
And yet, that's exactly the time when often it's best to talk about your struggles.
I love that recommendation of just being really open. I feel like if we did that about a lot of things, we would solve a lot of problems just in general. It'll
Yeah.
make sense and it would apply to money too. I would love to know as a money coach, um, this word budget gets thrown around a lot
Yep.
and feels like a dirty word. I feel
Yeah.
like it's like one of the B words that I say on the podcast is budget, and one of the B words I say on the podcast is boundaries. And those are the two B words that come up a lot of
Yeah.
times. And so talk to me about budgeting just for a minute because I feel like that's one of the recommendations I see a lot is like the first thing to do, the first place to get started is a budget. Do you agree
Yeah.
with that? Is that accurate? And will you tell us a
Yeah.
little bit more about like your thoughts on it?
Yeah. So everyone hates the word budget. It's
Yeah.
like, it's like this ball and chain.
Yes.
Boundaries, I actually would say, is like one of the most important words
Yeah.
because I think that's where a lot of issues come in life is people not setting great boundaries. However, around the word budget, I think if we just changed it to we're going to create a plan. Budget's a plan. So if you call it something else, suddenly that changes everything, right?
Mhm.
So if I was to travel from Canada down to Florida, we're doing a family trip. I don't just say to my kids and my husband, hey, we're leaving tomorrow. Let's go. And I'm not planning the route. I'm not planning the money that we're going to spend. You don't just get in the car and just sort of drive and hope you get to Florida, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is the same, we can't just hope that at the end of the year, this all kind of works out and everything shakes out okay and it'll all kind of work out. But that's the attitude most people have around money.
Mhm.
Uh, and it's so easy to spend now. It's not like for my grandparents, they'd have to get in the car. Maybe they'd see something on TV that they wanted, get in the car, see if the store here had it. Meh, probably not going to travel, 20 minutes to go to a shopping center. Maybe I don't really want it anymore because it's just such a hassle to get it, right? Whereas now, if you want something in your sleep, you can buy things on Amazon already, right? You don't have to in your credit card and tap, tap, tap. You leave the store and you're like, whoa, how much did I even spend? Like,
Yeah.
what did they ring up as the number there? Um, and so it's just so much harder to be really diligent about our money. So if we think of that as like, we know it's a struggle, it's harder than it ever has been. And it's easier to spend. So let's make a plan and let's stick to it. And the more you plan, the better you're going to have success in anything in life. So I wouldn't say that's necessarily the first step. I think right before that, what you really need to do is look at your numbers.
Mhm.
And that is just a matter, again, people hate doing it, but you have to recognize where is the money going. And more times than not, people are like, oh, I had no idea. I had
Mhm.
no idea I was spending on that. I had no idea. Because again, it's so easy to unconsciously spend. So yeah, it's time to just get to that base of like, where am I at? Where are some things I'm doing really well? Where are some things I'm struggling in? And now what's the plan going to be?
Mhm. I appreciate you giving us both the first step and such a great reframe of calling a budget a plan. I feel like budget for me is one of those things that feels very, like you said, like a ball and chain, right? And so it's not, I don't know, budgeting is tricky. I'm one who grew up with not a lot of really good money information. And so this has been an interesting thing for me to learn about the last many years. And so I love having this conversation with you where I can learn a little bit more. I would love to know, how would you talk to people who are like, well, a budget, it's just like an expense tracker. And I'm having a hard time shifting from expense tracking to budgeting because I feel like that comes up a lot. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, well, I think that the difference in just sort of tracking your expenses and creating a budget, the difference and sort of the missing piece in that is what's the dream, what's the plan, what's the goals. So again, if you take a 9-year old, I have a 9-year old, and I say to her, what would you like to do this year? Here's, 1 to 50, list out all the things you want to do. She'll probably come up with 100 things, right?
Yeah.
She'll say, I want this, I want that, I want that. But you give that same list to an adult and they'll usually come up with 5 things, 3 to 5.
Mm,
So we don't dream anymore, right? We don't really think of like, what do we want to accomplish? And the years fly by, right?
mhm.
We only have a certain amount of time here, hopefully more than less, but you can't wait to do all these different things, right? So maybe it's not an extravagant trip to Europe for 3 months, right? But what are some little things even that you can do? Maybe it's a smaller trip. Maybe it's going to an escape room. Maybe it's dinner. You love going out for dinner. So figuring out what works for you and not what everybody else is doing, but creating even just some little plans and goals. So, as you're working hard in your job or as an entrepreneur, that you're taking that time, right? Especially as an entrepreneur, because it's just easy to work, work, work. But, to time block that time, whether it's, quarterly or once a month, and put some things in and make sure that they happen, right? Book them so they actually happen.
Mhm. That's such great advice. Oh, I really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. Candace, I would love to know, you've had this. So you started out being raised by entrepreneurs. This was your whole world. You shifted. You had this aunt that I know was very significant to you, who really inspired you. You shifted to accounting, and now you're back in this entrepreneur world. You weren't going to have kids. Now you've got 4 kids. You've got like all of this, lots of change. What does success look like to you now, and how has that changed in the last course of your life?
Yeah. I think that more and more I'm looking at things that are legacy based that are really important to me. So the giving back, I know whenever, if ever going to retire, that I would just go straight into like volunteering full time.
Uh-huh.
And, I always say there's probably something that you hear about that really like pains you, right? Like it might be, I drive past homeless people and it like kills me every
Mhm.
time. Or it might be, for me, one of the things is trafficking. Like in the state, there should not be trafficking, right? So find those things, those passions, and make sure that that's part of your life, even if it's a little piece, right? So right now, I don't do any significant anything with trafficking, but I know that that's like a future thing.
Mhm.
But I do a lot of giving back in the community, and that's really important to me. So it doesn't have to be kind of right now, but again, don't just put everything off indefinitely. So legacy is really a big part of what I view as success now. But I think just in general, success really has to be looked at holistically within your life. So you can have business success, but if your marriage is falling apart, you probably aren't feeling very successful. So making sure that you're taking care of like your body, your health, your mental health, having great relationships with family and friends, making sure, everything's good with the kids and you're being intentional, I think is the key. So it's really hard to have work life balance as an entrepreneur, but you can have really good work life integration if
Mhm.
you make very intentional. So time blocking the date night, time blocking stuff with the kids. Yeah, and just asking them, what do you guys want to accomplish? What do you want to do? And making sure that they're realizing their goals and plans as well.
I love that answer. Legacy and a holistic approach to success. That's really inspiring to me. I appreciate that. Candice, I would love to know on this entrepreneur journey of yours, how has being a parent through all of this changed you as a person?
So, one of the things that makes things tricky in my life, I would say the hardest part of my life is that I have a daughter who has a disability. And through the teenage years, it's been like really hard,
Mhm.
because everything's kind of accentuated, so bad behavior becomes, hours of screaming and different things like that we have to deal with. And so, I would say that's the trickiest part. And I think through struggle, it really makes you appreciate the good times, you
Mhm.
know? So sometimes parenting is so hard and it could be, you have a troubled teenager or, your teen's getting into drugs or whatever it is, right? And you're like, man, this is so hard. But, it's if everything was good, you wouldn't appreciate it either, right?
Mhm.
So getting through the struggle, it makes us, depend on other people to help us. We need to talk about it with other people to kind of help deal with it. But yeah, there's lots of times where my parents have come in and they've said, "Hey, we'll take her for the night," and it's just been like this huge relief, right? Um, so I would say just that I think I'm more grateful. I'm grateful when things are going well, when you've been through struggle.
Mhm.
And I would say the second piece or the second side to that would be I just have more patience, like in the end, what matters most is the kids, right? The relationships I have at home. So if a sale doesn't go well or a customer isn't happy or, they're frustrated with something, it's like, you know what, you can only do your best and then you got to move on. And in the end, it's just work, right? What things that matters are the kids and the relationships that I have. So I think that having kids has just probably calmed me down more as an entrepreneur. Not everything has to be top, top, top performance, go, go, go. I think I've sort of settled down and maybe that's an age thing too. And I think I'm a better and more understanding employer, that my employee needs a day off. It's like, go ahead. Because again, like in your world, your kids matter the most. Or
Yeah.
your sister's getting married. Yeah, go be there for her, right? That's what really matters. So I think that we're a better team, and we work better because we have that respect, and then we just care about each other and respect each other and the relationships that we have outside of work. So,
Mhm. I love it feels so refreshing to speak of it that way. I think there's almost a permission to be a human again when you're able to
well,
say, "This is the priority," and, speaking of, I did my best, and if my best wasn't good enough, okay, and just there's almost a freedom that comes from that. And it was interesting, this is an audio podcast, but I had the luxury of seeing you talk about it. And I watched your body language just relax as you spoke about that. That was really a really cool experience for me to see that. And so I really appreciate you sharing that. Do you experience guilt around parenting and entrepreneurship ever?
I think there's so. Yeah, I think somebody would be lying to say that they never have guilt. I try and look at the positives of things. So again, that my kids have had cool opportunities because I'm an entrepreneur. So I've gone to a seminar in Texas and I brought my son with me, right? Because we can, right? And we could kind of spend that extra time together. And um, yeah, I haven't had to beg for time off to go to field trips and things like that. So I try and focus on that kind of stuff. There's days when, I don't see the kids, right? Let's be honest. I'm
Yeah.
just out working and I get home at 10 o'clock. They're already in bed. And you're like, man, that was kind of lousy.
Hmm. Hmm.
Sure would have liked to ask them how their day was today. But, you could beat yourself up, but it doesn't do anything. It's not productive. So if there is something that you feel guilty about, either you need to work through that and figure out, okay, maybe something has to change here, or you need to move on, right? But just sitting in guilt doesn't get you anywhere.
Mm. Such wisdom. You just, oh my goodness, you're just blowing my mind. It's so wonderful. Candace, I feel like you've already answered this question a lot, but I would love to ask you very pointedly, what do you wish people knew about being a parent and an entrepreneur simultaneously?
I think that the biggest struggle that I've had and that I see other people face is managing your time. And sometimes that's going to mean that you need to get help when maybe you don't want to. So, the classic where a lot of women will start is, okay, I had this baby. I don't want to go back to work. I have this cool business idea. I can make this work, right?
Mhm.
But it's really hard to have a toddler running around while you're trying to make sales calls, right? And they're screaming. Or you're nursing and you're on a webinar, right? Like
Mm,
it's just,
I've been
oh,
there. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we all have, but we'll never admit it, right?
Right.
Like all of those kinds of things. So often we're just trying to struggle through it and be like, I can do this and I can, but like asking for help is huge.
Mhm.
So people say to me often, like, how are you actually doing this? Well, I've got tons of help. Like I've got people employed, got a house cleaner, my parents are involved. Like if any of those pieces weren't there, I wouldn't be doing all the things I'm doing. Right. So it
Mhm.
always looks so easy on social media and again, nobody talks about the struggles. You don't see people crying and
Right.
up all night wondering how they're going to make this all work. So you don't see the struggle, right? But know that everybody has struggled. Everyone is struggling. But if you could figure out a way to get help, even if it's like, hey, can you watch my kids or my kid for like 2 hours or 3 hours? And there's another entrepreneur mom, and it's like, hey, I'll watch yours for 3 hours tomorrow. Now you got 3 hours where you can get a ton done. So
Mom can
really,
do so much with uninterrupted time.
yeah, yeah, it's incredible, right?
Yeah.
So if you could find some type of focused time, um, whatever that looks like, and however you're going to get people to help you, it could be a grandparent, a friend, sister. But like, let's stop trying to do this all by ourselves.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm on this train. Absolutely. I'll second that. Please stop trying to do it all by yourself. Yes. Candace, you mentioned earlier in the podcast that you feel like hustle is your middle name, but I want to ask you a question about that word hustle because, as you know, the name of this podcast is Reimagining Hustle. The
yeah,
reason that I named it that is when I first started my entrepreneur journey, I was not a parent and I super bought into hustle culture. I loved it. It felt so
yeah,
good to me. And then I had my first child and my whole world stopped as it does. And I
yeah.
knew I had to reimagine what hustle looked like for me. So I would love to know, how do you reimagine hustle?
I think that probably again, your perspective changes over time. So giving back to the community, doing a lot more of that stuff, and I just have time more to do it because my kids are older, right?
Mhm.
Whereas when we were in the toddler years, there's no other time to do other stuff. You're just like working or you're with them, right? Because they're hanging on you or they're, you're dragging them along on your leg. And
Yeah.
so I think it's just really looking at the season of life that you're in. And like you said, knowing that hustle's going to look different, and being okay with that. Because again, when you can't forgive yourself that you can't keep up now like you used to, that's again, it's just too much guilt, and um, it's just distracting from getting stuff done. So I think it's just really being true to like, where am I at? Life's different now. That's okay. And I'm just going to do what I can right now and forgive myself and move on from the fact that these stages are just different. It can also be that you are getting into the stage of life where you're going to take care of aging parents, right? Or different things come up, and maybe your spouse ends up on long-term disability, and now you're caring for a spouse. Like, life throws curveballs, and we just have to do the best that we can.
Mhm. I appreciate that reimagined version. That's really wonderful. Candice, before we find out where we can find you online, because we all need much more of you, will you give us a 30-second pep talk just for other moms on this journey?
Um, I would say that's a really tough one because, of course, like again, entrepreneurs are in such different stages. So I would maybe just say, if you have this dream of what you would like to do, to figure out a way to pursue it. Because I think that there are so many dreams that die because people don't know how they're going to do it. They're not like, I don't know how I can start a business. I don't know where to turn to. And the other problem in today's world is that there's so much information, but it's hard to take action when you have so much at your fingertips. Like, maybe I just need to research a little bit more. And maybe there's a different way to do this. Oh, this guy says I got to do that. And oh, I got to spend 10,000 with that guy. And then I could get to that. Like, at some point, you got to turn that all off and just think, how am I going to run this business? And maybe talk to one or two people. But the amount of information out there is just, it's too much. So really look at what can work again in your life, and pursue that dream instead of letting it die thinking, no, I don't know how to get this dream off the ground.
Thank you for that. You're speaking to my heart. These are the things that I feel really strongly about as well. So thank you for that. Candice, please tell us, where can we find you online? We need more of you. For people who want to work with you, where's the best place to connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm all over social media, so you can find me under my name, Candice Bakx-Friesen, if it's Instagram or Facebook, LinkedIn, and my website for my money coaching is called investorsmarts.ca.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that we link everything in the show notes. Candice, again, thank you for your grace, for your generosity, and for the gift of your time. Yet again, it's interesting how, for me at least, I think that I really needed you today, like where I'm at in my life right now. I think I needed this. And I know that all of my listeners as well will definitely benefit from everything you've shared with us today. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, anytime.
Thanks for listening to Reimagining Hustle with Roxanne Merkett. If you like the show and want more, check out reimagininghustle.com, and please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back next week with another episode. See you soon.